Hello my bookish friends out there in booktube land. It's that time of year, so welcome to the video 10 winter classics to enjoy. In this video we're going to go through 10 classic books, all of which are set entirely in winter or at least have snow all the way throughout. So without further ado, let's dig in, shall we? The first book on our list is an absolutely world famous one, which many haven't read because they judge it by what they think it's going to be like. And it is The Call of the Wild by Jack London. This book is set in the Yukon, so that's northwest Canada, during the Klondike Gold Rush. And we follow Buck, the domesticated dog, who is forced into a life on the dog sledding teams, and to confront the harshness of that world, the harshness of the environment, and the cruelty of men over their animals. As Buck is enduring this, we get this inner change as he turns to the more primal instincts of his species. He gets a calling back to his ancestry. And what we get is a gripping tale of endurance and change and, that calling to your inner instinct. Jack London, by the way, was a phenomenally good writer. If you want to feel winter, especially harsh, snowy scenes, Jack London is brilliant. If you love animals, you'll love this. The one thing that puts people off The Call of the Wild, and books like White Fang as well, is that 1980s Christmas Sheen movie, which makes it overtly for children. It's a great adventure romp through, this book, but it's far more than just a children's book. It is exquisitely written. So that was the first one, Call of the Wild by Jack London. The second book on our list is a much slower and quieter novella, if you like to just think and spend a season in the snow. And it's Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. It's a well-renowned novella. Now, this book is set in New England during a very harsh winter, but it's got this claustrophobic, isolated feel, very grey-white, yet some of the descriptions of the snow are just absolutely beautiful. Now, Ethan Frome lives in a small village in New England, and he's got a pretty dull life, but he does have dreams, he does have ambitions, but there's that oppressive, claustrophobic feel about being back in those days in a small village and not being able to go beyond anywhere. Until a very vivacious young girl comes into the village and meets Ethan Frome. We've got lovely scenes in this, by the way, if you like this kind of ideal. At night time, the bluish snow, and then there's a church with the warm light cascading out onto the snow outside. Those kinds of environments. But what sparked is this yearning and longing that could threaten to break up all of Ethan Frome's world. And we get a sense here of forbidden passions and desires. You get a sense of duty that has to be done. There is also a particular scene in this book, if you've read it, you'll know what I mean, at Ethan's home, the farm, that scared the life out of me. Not because anything actually happens, but just the sheer atmosphere, blue lit and howling because of the wintry winds. So that was the second one. By the way, it has a very good ending as well. That was Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. The third book on our list may be ideal for you if you like a long epic, a saga that carries on. If you want a book that you could literally take from December to February to read and you would enjoy it, it is Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak. I don't know if you can ever summarise this book. And a lot of people have put off it because of the film, which I was made to watch by my dad when I was 10. Good grief, I'd lost the will at that point. I aged about 5 years watching it. However, don't judge a book by the film, nor from the age you may have first come across it. So we've got in this story Yuri as our main character. I think we start in 1902, if I remember correctly. And this book will progress up, through the oppression of the Tsarist regime, into the First World War, then the Bolshevik Revolution, the October Revolution. And Yuri meets an absolute huge cast of characters. That's the trickiest part of this book, is that there's a huge cast of characters and Pasternak flicks between their three different names, which is common in Russian literature. But the scenery described, the travails that people go through, the loves that develop, the loves that are smashed, the difficulties endured, the horrors that come up, the changes in character from what seemingly is a nice person to later turning up older and is totally different kind of character. Moving all across different landscapes. You've got Moscow and Petersburg and then way out in almost exile. This book is in the grand tradition of the Russian epics. And interestingly, it won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Funnily enough though, partly because the CIA thought it would be funny to get Pasternak the prize, because his work was banned in Soviet Russia. So the CIA sort of made sure he won the Nobel Prize, making Soviet people very curious as to why Pasternak had been banned. But that's just a bit of a side story. But this is an epic. And if you love life, like just seeing life, and it's Pasternak's interpretation of the events that he himself went through, then you should, maybe it's time to dust off this book, get it down. And do you know, I don't think I ever reached the end of it. So maybe I should read it this winter. So that was number 3, Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak. How about a rather famous murder mystery for our 4th classic book set in the snow or in winter? Here's the plot. See if you know what book it is. There's a man in a study. Outside in the house are lots of other people. In fact, quite near the study, people are moving around up and down the landing, when a gunshot rings out in the study. People go to investigate, but the study is locked from the inside. When they finally break their way in, there is a man there, dead, been shot, but nobody else. The fire is roaring, so no one could have gone up the chimney. No one's hidden in any cupboards. And when they think of an escape through the window, they open the window and find that the ledges are covered in crisp virgin snow with no prints whatsoever, so no one left through the window. How was the murder done? Because it wasn't suicide. Enter Gideon Fell, that famous detective by John Dickson Carr, one of the masters at locked room mysteries, and the Hollow Man probably being the most famous of them. This is surrounded by snow permanently, this book. And what's better than a bit of snow and a murder mystery? It's intriguing how he begins to develop this story and senses of doubt and questioning yourself and personality and intrigue, and a very unusual, well, I won't say unusual, a surprising twist, which, very hard to work out, this book. So that's the 4th one, The Hollow Man by John Dickson Carr. I still remember vividly the whole crime scene, and I read this about 20 years ago. It's so vivid, the way he described it, captured my attention like you wouldn't believe. So that was number 4, The Hollow Man by John Dickson Carr. The 5th book on my list is a book that you have recommended to me over and over again, ever since I discovered the author Terje Vesaas from Norway. And the book is The Ice Palace. And being in Norway, not surprising that a fair bit of snow turns up in books, I suppose. But this recounts the story in a village of a young girl who's called Sis from my research. She's 11 years old, and another young girl the same age called Un. She moves in and they start forming a friendship. However, one day, one of the girls, Un, goes off to the ice castle. That's like where a waterfall comes over in cold winters and freezes. And Unne goes behind it and explores in the caverns and goes missing. Can't find her way out. The search begins for her, but no one can find her. And then suspicion turns on Sis to a degree, from what I've read. And then Sis enters her own ice palace of the mind. Apparently this is a brilliant exploration of loneliness and emotional impact of grief. And so many of you have recommended it to me that I will be getting this one this winter and reading it, so watch out for my review on it at some later point. The sixth classic on our list is from an author I've never talked about before, but who I love. And we're talking intrigue and high action. And this one is High Citadel by Desmond Bagley. Let me know down below if you used to read the Desmond Bagley books. So in High Citadel, there is a plane crash at the beginning into the Andes Mountains. Hence, we've got snow all the way through the book. This is not the same as, you know, the film Alive. It's not a football team that's got stuck up there. But the people that are up there, they need to, first of all, they need to survive the harsh conditions, only to find out that just located a short distance away is a bunch of mercenaries who are now going to hold them captive. But there's a thin ledge between them and the mercenaries, and now they've got to survive the harsh conditions and also fend off the mercenaries. You know, this is a great example of just good action, adventure, and that high level of tension that remains in the air. Desmond Bagley was masterful at this, and actually High Citadel was the very first Bagley book I ever read. I then went on to read many others, including The Golden Keel, which is phenomenal, Tightrope Men, all those kind of, the Vivero letters. But anyway, High Citadel suits winter because immediately in chapter 1 you were going to be plunged into absolutely icy and deep snow conditions, and the tension doesn't stop from there on out. The seventh book on our wintry book list of classics is a book which is remarkable. And if you like psychological books, you know, books that explore the human psyche and the conditions of us humans on the planet and what we do to one another, then this book is a must read. And it is One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. This is a remarkable book. Be prepared, it's bleak, but so moving. So he's called Shukov most of the time in the book, Denisovich, because it's Ivan Denisovich Shukov. He has been sent to a gulag. It's the freezing winter out in Siberia when he arrives. And we get to see through his eyes one day, the opening day when he gets there. And it's remarkable. It's set in this absolutely tormenting, frozen landscape, which proves to be both a literal prison and quite a metaphorical prison. Because when he goes in there, immediately he begins to see that you're under constant surveillance. You've got hardly any food, and the freezing temperature, the fight to stay warm, is present as well. Also, the interactions with the new characters that he meets is tempered and balanced like a fine meal, you know, the fine ingredients that are balanced out, with moments of resilience, moments of humanity that just touch him. That colour, it's like life in a moat, you know, not a moat, the water around a castle, a moat, a dot of dust, captured. And it reflects on, you know, the inhumanity of imprisoning people, especially, of course, in the gulags. But, you know, it's far more personal and psychological than, say, The Dead House by, what's his face? The famous one, Dostoevsky, which we read in my Patreon group. That's very descriptive and actually works well with this book because it gives you an idea of, you know, the many characters. But Denisovich is that immediacy of walking into this terrifying situation, but being able to see humanity as well as barbarity at the same time. So that was number 7, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Our 8th classic book is in the arena of a spy thriller. It's again high action and the unwitting hero, the reluctant hero who works as a spy. So in this book, the main character is Kenton. He's actually a journalist, and it starts like many a good book in winter on a train. He's talking to a guy called Rosen who says, could you hold on to a bunch of money for me as we get off the next stop and meet me somewhere else later, because I'm a Jew and the Nazis will search me and then they'll take my money off me. Anyway, Kenton, he's a bit of a miserable so-and-so, but he agrees to. Later goes to the hotel where he's to meet up with this man, Rosen, And lo and behold, the guy's dead. But in a mistake, he leaves his fingerprints at the scene of the crime and now is implicated. From here begins a network of criminal gangs linked to international governments and organisations. And Kenton finds himself, you know, in shifting alliances, meeting characters he has to trust, even though he's not sure he should, changes of identity, all that kind of stuff, all in the backdrop of snowy Eastern Europe. I mean, is there a better backdrop for a spy thriller? And the whole thing takes place, and snow is always present, muffling sounds like snow does, and also providing an impenetrable barrier of escape from various places. Oh, this book has got everything you want in a spy thriller. It's proper action, not quite James Bond, more finessed perhaps than James Bond. So that was the 8th one, Uncommon Danger by Eric Ambler. The 9th classic book for winter is by the most famous of authors on this list, and it's by Leo Tolstoy. Now, maybe you can guess it, or maybe you've never heard of this one. It's one of his novellas, and it's the Kreutzner Sonata. Have you heard of it? So practically all of this book takes place on one train journey, and it starts off in a winter station. Winter doesn't play heavily in this, but you know it's always there on the outside. The main character is, now what is his name? Pozhnyadov, I think is how you pronounce it. He is quite an embittered man. He gets on a train, and as the train is going through the wintry landscape, he begins to listen in on a conversation that a woman is having about marriage. And she argues that marriage should never be arranged. It should be purely based on love. At this point, Pozhnyadov bends in and asks the question, what is love? Because if love is, you know, that moment of being drawn to one's sole individual, it never lasts. And a discussion begins. And he begins to relate his own experiences with his own marriage, which has borne 5 children. Various questions about equality of the sexes come in. The role of pleasure in society. Tolstoy was a writer who was always on the exploration. Tolstoy is always looking at something more than story, which is why his works are so great in their classic tone. Because in this, he's examining, you know, almost an argument for sexual abstinence, I suppose. But Tolstoy was always looking at the things that cause difficulty in relationships, in society, or the way we approach them. And his insights are remarkably appropriate for a lot of the things that are argued about today. So if you like something that makes you contemplate some worldview, ideology, a take on things, to hear questions asked and answered, maybe you'll be interested in looking at the Kreutzner Sonata, which, you know, obviously is not as famous as many of his other works. So that was number 9, Kreutzner Sonata by, I nearly said Mozart then. It's Beethoven that it's named after because of an event that's recorded in the story. The book is by Tolstoy. And in fact, it spawned a rather relatively famous painting in 1901 based upon the story itself. The 10th and final book on this list of winter reads, all set completely in winter, is a book that was recommended to me. So I'm just going to relate to you the rough idea, and please tell me if you've read this, because this was a real success. Now, it was written in 1992, so fractionally outside my criteria of a classic, but super popular. And it's Miss Smilla's Feeling for Snow by Peter Huig, if I'm pronouncing any of that correctly. So this is a Danish book. Miss Smilla, Kavik, if I'm saying that correctly, Q-A-A-V-I-Q-A-A-Q, is a Greenland Inuit woman who has a Danish father. Anyway, she from an early age has been fascinated by snow, all the different kinds of snow. In the West, I remember learning this when I was studying English. In the West, we pretty much have one word for snow, don't we? At least in the English language. But there are other countries, other peoples, who have like so many words for snow. I believe one group of people has 38 different words for snow because of the different texture and movement and imprints and I don't know, whatever. Anyway, Miss Smilla, she knows snow inside out. She's studied it. She moves to Copenhagen. She meets a young boy called Isaiah. He's the sort of lonely son of an alcoholic next door neighbour. She befriends him. But one day he falls from a roof and dies. Now, the coroner's inquest says it was an accident, but because of her intimate knowledge of snow and how it works and different kinds of, Miss Smilla concludes that the boy didn't just slip and fall, that he was murdered. And so, with a nearby friend who also liked the boy, they begin to investigate and are drawn into a much more intricate dark web than you can imagine. I don't know much more, but I do know that this book then moves between like Denmark and Greenland and the Arctic, all in snow, and also gets probably a bit of a gothic kickoff because I know a large part of it takes place trapped on a boat. So that's always a good place to get stuck, isn't it? When you're isolated, things get tense. So that's the last of the 10. It's Miss Smilla's feeling for snow. I think in other book titles it's called Miss Smilla's sense of snow. And that idea, I love books that just focus in on a very almost esoteric knowledge. This, like to know snow that intimately, that you can deduce things from it. And she uses it throughout the book, apparently. That really grabs my imagination. So, those were the 10 works. And I just want to say one thing before someone else points it out. All of these books are set permanently in winter or with snow around. Even if it's not mentioned much like the Kreutzner Sonata, snow's there, but it's all set on a train. There is one that isn't, and that's Pasternak's Dr. Zhivago, because it's an epic. It sprawls like 2 decades, maybe more. And of course, that means it moves in and out of different seasons. But winter, I would say, is its overriding feel. The sense of cold, the sense of isolation stands out more when there's winter. There's particular scenes of trying to keep warm. And it's a great metonymic device, winter, for that sense of oppression and stuff like that. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out in case someone else says that Zhivago is not permanently set in winter. You're quite right, it's not. But it's the only exception on the list. All the others are set in snow and the cold and in winter. Tell me which one below you like the sound of most, which ones maybe you've read. Please add any recommendations to me, but try and keep your recommendations to the book has to be entirely set in winter, with maybe the exception of the opening if it needs to set a backstory. So, for instance, what is it, Winter Tale by Laura Ingalls Wilder? One of the House on the Prairies is set completely in snow, isn't it? So, yes, see if you can recommend any more to me. Until the next time, I wish you joy in whatever you read.